Hello and welcome to our next episode of Minerva PLM TV. I'm Jennifer Moore, your host, and I have with me today David Sherburne of davidgsherburne.com. David, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, you're welcome. It's great to be here, and I appreciate you having me.
Excellent. So, David, of course, we worked together years ago at a project on CareStream Health, and I got to know you quite well and your expertise at that time. But for those that don't know you, can you share a little bit about your background and what you're doing now?
Yeah, I'll start with what I'm doing now. I'm helping companies, kind of work through digital transformation, basically working on the different parts of a project, getting their charters together, helping them understand the requirements, and then, executing projects in the digital transformation space, in the PLM space, and the engineering space as well. So my background is I spent about 20 years in medical product development in engineering, and we released quite a few products to the marketplace, both software and hardware products. So I have a lot of experience in engineering, and then my career kind of shifted a little bit towards IT. So I became kind of a director that oversaw a lot of the engineering systems, the IT systems that support engineering. Then I also was able to get some experience in the IoT over 10 years ago, which was, back in those days, the Internet of Things was, connected products, machine to machine. So I got to see, we were one of the early adopters of connected products back when people didn't really understand what connected products could do for a business. So I had the advantage of being able to really understand the technology. Back then, we were looking for a second generation platform, and there was like 4 or 5 players in the marketplace. So it was kind of an interesting time, considering where we are today.
Mm-hmm.
So we did a lot of our own development, did a lot of our edge agents, did a lot of, kind of dealt with a lot of the problems that companies are dealing with today. So, and then also figuring out how to leverage the data was always a big challenge. And answering the question of why are we collecting this data and what's it going to do for our business was a real challenge back then. Things changed in around 2014 when, Harvard wrote that big article along with PTC's folks around, what digital transformation could do for businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And things got a lot easier at that point. But before then, it was kind of really trying to get people to understand, what the Internet of Things and connectivity could do for you.
Right.
So I have a lot of experience in that area as well. So now I'm taking all that experience, from both the engineering side, the IT side, and really trying to help companies, bridge that gap that usually exists between IT and R&D, and then really try to formulate a strategy around, connected products and also in engineering, because as data begins to really infiltrate our markets, things are moving a lot faster. So companies are having a lot more struggles with configuration management, PLM type topics. How do you do constant software updates to equipment, and how do you make sure your configurations are understood in the field, and extending that, PLM kind of concept, product lifecycle management concept, beyond the engineering departments, into the servicing of the equipment, and really keeping track of those baselines from the very beginning of a product, till it's out in its customer, till it dies in its customer's, place. So it's a very interesting dynamic that's occurring right now in our world. It's probably the most exciting time in my whole career. And I'm a pretty old guy, so tell by the gray beard.
That's too funny. And really awesome experience. And of course, we've had a couple of other people on here on Minerva PLM TV already talking about digital transformation. But I really wanted to talk to you about this topic because on your blog, which I actually have pulled up over here, I saw that you had written a couple of different articles about how you're viewing really digital transformation as a shift from selling things to selling services. And that's a bit of a different take. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah. Back when I was talking in 2013 and 14, I was invited to a conference on the future of engineering software, and they kind of challenged me to try to explain, connectivity and where connectivity is going to go. So in this particular format, you kind of stood up in front of a whiteboard and you had to draw a picture, and then there was like maybe 20, 25 people that you talked through the picture. So, I kind of drew that circle diagram that you see on my website, and it really helped people kind of understand where data was going to take us. So I kind of look at it as really a shift from selling things today which most companies, a lot of companies sell a car, or they sell a widget, or they sell something. And then they just give it, the customer has to deal with it, right? They deal with the servicing of it, they deal with calling in when it breaks and all that type of stuff. But what I saw happen when we were at Carestream working on connectivity was that when you connect a device, you get information from that device, and you can kind of change the way you sell that device and service that device and respond to your customers. So that was very clear to me early on because of our kind of advanced experience with connecting things. And I really see it as a shift from selling a thing to selling services, but also selling experiences. I think it kind of goes one step beyond that as well. And the experience with the customer is extremely important. So I kind of see there's like a couple of stages of shift. When a company first connects things, they gather data and they're trying to sort through really what it means to their business. And kind of stage one, a company becomes kind of data aware. They get data, they begin to see what they can do with their own equipment. They begin to look internally first, because most companies are internally focused, honestly. And there's some of them that are way beyond that, like Amazon, and you can see the benefits of that. But most companies are, they have to deal with their service organization and service calls, and they're trying to drive productivity. So they use that data at first to really try to become better service, provide better service. And I typically see, today, when something breaks, customers have to call and they have to talk to somebody. And that is a reasonable experience if you have a nice person on the phone, but it's a waste of their time.
Right.
So for me, this all comes back to time. And so when you have data that is available to you, you can become more proactive. You can see when something's not working like it's supposed to be working. You can, actually, if you get good enough, you can actually go fix something before it actually breaks at the customer site. And we had some experiences with that where we would have hospital communication systems, picture archive PACS systems, and RIS systems that would basically are PLM for hospitals. So they would run the hospital, they'd run the admissions, they'd run the image management, stuff like that. And hospitals, back in the day would sometimes not really take care of supporting those systems. And so simple things like, storage being full, would cause a disaster at a hospital. And then we have to dispatch people, and it would cost us a big service event. It would cost them downtime. It was a real mess. So when we first started doing some instrumentation, some simple things like just paying attention to that and being able to see that tables need to be cleaned up and things need to be cleaned up in their storage and cleaning up for them, and then giving them some advanced warning. It says, hey, you guys you need to think a little bit more about, what's coming, the storage stuff. We were able to avoid like 98% of those types of disasters.
That's really impressive.
Yeah, and quite frankly, it was very simple. So we're not talking sophisticated AI or anything like that. We're just talking, getting data back and understanding what it means and what's critical for your customers. You can make a big change in your service performance and also your customer loyalty. The other thing we noticed is that when we were started to move to being more proactive, customers were really happy with us. I mean, we were looking at net promoter scores and they jumped. And they were very happy when we would do things in advance. And I think another good example is back in the day when you first got cell phones, and I have kids that were teenagers at that time. And you get a bill and it'd be like $350 or $400 or something because you turned on text and you turned on messaging, and your kids were going crazy sending like 3,000 texts a month, and you get this huge bill. And then you have to call up and do an argument, and sometimes they'd waive stuff. And then they got more proactive where they would say, hey, you're running out of, your text limits during, when they used to monitor that. And then it became data limits, but they would start to give you some warning. And so that was very helpful because it saved me time. I could go have the conversation in advance, and not have to be surprised by some huge bill at the end of the month. So that's another example of how these kind of things are, a little bit of data can go a long way of, a little bit of data awareness can go a long way to helping your customers and helping your business. So that's kind of the first step, which is a pretty rudimentary step. And then I think as a company becomes more data focused, they can start to begin to see their customers' operations. So things, they could also offer different models,
Hmm.
for their customers. So as an example, they could offer a pay per click or a pay per print kind of a thing where, they know that there's consumables, let's say in a piece of equipment as an example, and they know their customers, usage of those materials. They can actually resupply those materials on a regular basis. They can do the inventory management for the customer. And then they can begin to, get a little bit more margin because they're kind of splitting that work with the customers. And they can begin to help their customers' operations. That's kind of the second step. When you get beyond your own walls and you can actually understand how to make your business better and make your equipment more reliable, which is really important, you can begin to move into the customer space and help the customers with their operations. I noticed in the medical marketplace, we had some sensitive detectors and stuff, and so did our competitors. And sometimes they get dropped. So we were able to, I've seen, in the marketplace, they've been able to tell customers, hey, this thing got dropped at this time by this technician. So, we need to kind of take a look at it, right? So you were able to, help customers with their own operations with some things like that. And then I think the third step is really a more advanced step. When you become data driven, you can begin to actually look at the marketplace, understand how the marketplace, as well as your customers, can be affected by the information maybe coming from your piece of equipment or your service or your your phone app or whatever. And you can begin to do things like matrix with other companies, offer things with other companies, at least understand where your competitors are going in the marketplace. And if you team up with the right people, you can actually bring some real differences to the marketplace and to your customers as partnerships. So I think as you kind of move down that continuum, the revenue opportunity gets bigger. I have these circles that kind of represent crudely, revenue opportunity. And today, it's a very small opportunity. It's a very small circle. And then tomorrow, I think as you get into partnerships and get into expanding the marketplace and really becoming a strategic partner with your customers, there's large revenue opportunities to be able to share and drive efficiencies across the marketplace and the supply chains and things like that. And those partnerships can actually, bring a large revenue opportunity. So,
Hmm.
so that's kind of how I see the market changing. I think companies are moving from being very internally focused to being very customer focused, because you really have to understand your customer in a different way than in the past. You're not just trying to say, I'm going to give a piece of equipment to my customer and I need to know these features. I need to know how my customer uses that piece of equipment in their operation. I need to understand how the marketplace uses this, this device and what it can, and what data from that device, how can that impact my customer's operation and the marketplace overall. So I think you see some examples of that today with Amazon's Alexa, app. If you look at Amazon, they are really far ahead of so many companies, and they get used as an example all the time in logistics, but they've kind of run that gauntlet that I just talked about from the early days where, they were just an online seller. Then they've really figured out how to make their internal operations extremely efficient.
Hmm.
And they did that. And by doing that, I can order something and have it the next day. It's just crazy today how fast you can get something from, Amazon. It still blows my mind. I ordered some clothes, just the other day, and I got it like the very next day, less than 24 hours later. And I was just blown away by that, that can happen that fast. And then they've kind of moved into things like, their Alexa app and their smart hub. And, I'm an engineering type guy, so I've got smart hubs all around. I got all these different types of widgets and gadgets for turning on and on my lights, off and on my lights and everything else. And what Amazon has done is partnered with all those different, she's talking to me right now. So what that particular device has done is been able to become a hub for my home. And so all the different manufacturers, gadgets connect to that, and they make it really easy for me to connect my smart home. So that's an example of a matrixed offering, and it's an example of a company that's kind of run that gauntlet, and really help logistics with their logistics folks, and then also moved all the way into, the matrix offerings as well.
Absolutely. And just kind of taking it a step back for a minute and going to that customer focus element, because it's not, I mean, yes, it's changing from selling things to selling services, but the purpose is to provide more value to your customer. And then, of course, your business gains value in return. And I think even as a consumer, there's lots of applications of this in the business to business space, but even as a consumer, with the example that you just gave of Amazon and Alexa is great. But even like the car that I drive, right? It tells me when it needs service, whenever I left it unlocked, whenever, you know what I mean? Like I can start it on my way back from the airport when it's 0 degrees outside without having to be there at all. And instead of, having to go to my mechanic and say, it's making this little pinging sound and I don't know what that means. The car tells me, hey, your left front tire is off balance or whatever the case may be. So even from that perspective, I think we all get a lot of value back already from, a lot of these connected services and the way that we can interact with these products. So I see a lot of that value, and you've talked a lot about the 3 steps that companies can take to kind of move through this shift. What's a question that you would say a company should ask themselves whenever they're trying to start going down those 3 major steps? What should they really be asking themselves to make sure that they are providing that value and keeping the customer in focus?
Yeah, I think there's really a basic question, and I think a lot of companies take this as a technology problem up front, and I've talked a lot about that. They take we need to put an IoT platform in, okay, so we got to do digital transformation,
Mm-hmm.
and so sometimes when I start conversations with companies, I say, okay, you're doing digital transformation or you have a transformation project, why, right? And sometimes companies can articulate the strategy behind it and what they're trying to accomplish and what they're going to be doing for their customers. And they look at it that way. But there's a lot of companies that, it's quiet when you ask that question. And I think it's really an important question to ask yourself. Where are you in that continuum? Are you just going from being reactionary from service to try to be more proactive? And is that the first step? Is your internal operations? And if that's the first step, what data do you need to collect to be able to actually execute that particular step? And so having an overarching strategy is extremely important, and understanding where you're trying to target that data is probably the most important thing that a company needs to really grapple with and understand. And what I find a lot is that if you just turn the engineers loose on data, they'll collect all sorts of data, but you'll find out, I don't know how many companies I've talked to, including myself back in the old days, when this stuff started, it was like, yeah, we're collecting a ton of data, but we're only using like 5% of it, and I think a lot of companies were in that same boat. They were experimenting and trying to understand, but it was a very technical, engineering focused, or maybe an IT focused activity. And really, this is a business activity. Digital transformation is a business activity, and it needs to really have a business driver, a business strategy, the right people that understand the market, because there's a different kind of person that has to understand the customer environment than there was to understand feature development. And I think as companies shift from being a feature development company to a services and development company and experiences development company, there's a big piece of that sometimes is missing in companies, that they need different people to understand better interfaces, to understand what the customer needs, to understand the customer's processes and operations. There's a whole type, if you go from a service department that's been reactionary for the last 25, 30, 40, 50 years, and all of a sudden you want to be proactive, they're really great at grabbing the phone and throwing them stuff at the customer when they need it, but they might not be good at anticipating when a piece of equipment's going to break. It's a different kind of a person, different kind of analysis. So I think those are the kind of questions the company has to ask is, do I have the people? Do I have the strategy? And am I focused on the right things? And how do I communicate that focus across my company? Because digital transformation includes a lot of different players than straight product development. It used to be engineering and inbound marketing and stuff like that, that those people would work together to figure out what the feature set needed to be, research, things like that. Well, now with the connected product strategy, you need to have those people, plus you need to have IT, you may end up having service and logistics. I've been in programs where people are looking at each other around the room. They've never worked with each other before, because digital transformation and data and things like that drive a very wide swath of cross-functional organizations together that need to work together to deliver something. So, having a good strategy, having a charismatic leader that can actually communicate that strategy, lining up your portfolio. A lot of times portfolio management is very siloed and everyone gets their baseline budgeting every year. Digital transformation requires you to break all that.
Right.
And really think that through and make sure that money's going to the right place at the right time and things are coordinated at a program level. And a lot of companies are failing at that. And I've seen statistics that say, 70% of digital transformation projects are failing. And in my opinion on that is that's because they lack strategy and the cross-functional understanding of what has to get done. Mm-hmm. That's a big struggle. It's a lot bigger struggle in technology. I've done projects before where, the technology is ready in, half to 3/4 of the time, and the company was struggling with their internal processes and, maybe sales commissions. I mean, there's all sorts of things that come into play here and that companies need to work through.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to take it back one more time. You kind of touched on this idea of a matrix offering and how your Alexa interacts with your household lighting and other, features and functions in there. And can you just take one quick second to define a matrix offering for those that maybe don't have too much experience with it? Just like, what are the elements, who's involved?
Yeah, I look at a matrix offering as anything that's multi-vendor. So, like we talked about Alexa, as a hub. And, it's also with the auto example that you gave. You're starting to see, Alexa show up in Toyotas and I think GM cars as well. I think they put it in a Buick or something like that. So that's one, matrix offering to me, the elements of a matrix offering is you have, an established company that is offering a service to, customers that's popular. And then you begin to take that offering and put it in other places where the customer could get benefit from it. Like instead of just having a little puck on my desk or whatever that I can talk to, I can actually drive in my driveway and talk to my car and have all my lights go on, right? And I have a Fitbit now that actually has it built into the Fitbit. So I can stand outside at night, and if I want to flip off my floodlight, I just push my little button on my Fitbit, and I can turn off my lights, or I can turn on a stereo, or I can do things like that. So it's really the elements of it aren't really necessarily specific, but a matrix offering is one portion of that last circle too, where companies are combining. In a hospital environment, as an example, you may have a bunch of manufacturers' equipment, and I know in Europe they were starting to request data from individual devices so they could build a dashboard, for their information, for their hospital, so they can consolidate information so that they can run more efficiently instead of just having a bunch of apps from every company. They could actually put a dashboard together. So it's another example of a customer-focused offering that's a matrix of multiple companies' information to make it easier for their operations. I also see in that last circle, apps that are very adaptive. I think you've seen the airlines kind of go from that. If from maybe 10 years ago, where everything was just kind of a mess, to being almost real time now, where you're cruising through an airport. None of us really cruising through airports much these days, but before this whole COVID thing, we were going through airports and things would update automatically. I mean, your gate changes, your flight status, what was your incoming flight status, all that type of stuff. That was all changing, more and more real time. So I see when your data, when you're data driven, you begin to offer things more like real time applications and, things like that where people can really, get a lot of benefit from that. So I kind of see, you know, that last circle is partnerships and things like that to drive, you know, better experiences for your customers. Right?
Mm-hmm. I think that's really amazing. And I love the healthcare example because it also, you know, it's not just the different companies working together to provide better service to the hospital. It's then in turn the hospital being able to provide lower cost, more responsive and better service to their patients as well. So it's like a domino effect, and it just keeps on giving. It's wonderful.
Yeah, exactly. And I think companies are going to get more comfortable with that. I mean, I think, you know, I think there's over time, you know, I think companies are going to have to become much less internally focused and more focused on what's best for their customers. And I think there's going to be a lot of revenue opportunity from that shift. And I think it's going to be really uncomfortable though, because, you know, who are your partners? Your partners can become your enemies. You know, there's all that type of stuff that goes on.
Right.
But I think the days of closed systems and closed software and not sharing things and things that maybe we've been used to, at least I've been used to in my career, I think are going to give way to much more open matrix type relationships that drive a lot of efficiency for the customer. And I think it's the age of the customer. Some of the, you know, that's one of the other quotes, you know, from some of the research companies and things like that, you know, and I think that's realistic. I think we're still in the early stages of it,
mm-hmm.
but you're starting to see, you know, companies take a much bigger interest in their customers and their customers' experiences than you ever had.
Mm-hmm. I think it's a very exciting time. I totally agree with you. Can't wait to see where we go next as the, you know, shift to focusing on the customer and the shift to services is, you know, more widespread, and we have even more of these matrix offerings. So thank you so much, Dave. Is there anything else that you'd like to share today? Any final thoughts?
Well, yeah, I think the disruption is really coming. I think, you know, everyone has to realize that disruption is coming. If you look at a little company like Square, and I think it's a good financial example where, you know, I also have a photography business, as you can tell in the background. And, you know, I was always trying to, you know, collect credit cards, but in order to get you know, the old fashioned way is you pay like $350 a month for the privilege of, you know, collecting money using a credit card. And Square broke that model.
Yeah,
I mean,
they did.
Completely broke that model and made it easy for me to use my cell phone to get, you know, collect money for my work, right? And make it easy for the customers. And they've continued to make that easier and easier and easier. And they provide me services now. We talked about that second circle. You know, I can see my inventory cells. I can actually put my inventory into that application. You know, I can do a whole bunch of things associated with Square, and all they charge me is a small percentage of my revenue. So that is really advantageous for me. And if you look at Square stock price from where it IPO'd, it's exploded.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great example of a company that's providing a huge service to what was underserved or unserved market. And by actually walking their way up that chain, getting their internal operations really efficient, and then also now, you know, looking at their customers' operations, you know, they've made a huge business out of that. And now they're continuing to extend that and extend that and extend that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's that's another great example of disruption that's coming. And I think it's really starting to shake the banks up.
Oh yeah,
it's pretty interesting. You know, there's some realization that you know, that things are on the move, and even in an old industry like that, you know, there's disruptors like Square, which I think are extremely you know, important to pay attention to.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so and you know, in closing, I just think it's really important that companies, you know, take this seriously, look at their marketplace, look at their equipment, and what opportunities are out there, and really try to think ahead strategically of what's coming, because every industry is going to be affected in some way. Some a lot worse than others, yeah, some a lot more than others, and some companies are going to be, I guess, affected a lot worse than others. But I think it's
mm-hmm.
an important time in our history. It's a really exciting time too.
Absolutely, it is. And I love the example of Square. I mean, even at our local farmers market, right? Where we live is very close to the Amish communities and whatnot. And they drive out here set up at the farmer's market, and they're even using Square.
Yeah, everyone, yeah, you look at these little mobile food trucks, and you just look all over the place. It constantly is showing up everywhere, so it's pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much, Dave. I really appreciate you taking the time to be on the show with me. I cannot wait to bring you back where we can talk a little bit more about two of our favorite topics in the medical device industry, specifically around things like DHF, DMR, and requirements linking and reporting and all of those wonderful things. But this has been a great take on digital transformation. Very exciting. Loved it.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. And it's always good to see you, Jen. I appreciate it. Looking forward to coming back.
Thanks, Dave. Have an awesome day.
Thanks. You do the same.
And to all of our viewers, if you like this content, remember to hit the like and subscribe button so you'll never miss another episode. And if you have a question that you'd like to see answered on a future episode of Minerva PLM TV, drop your comments below or shoot me an email at jmo@minerva-plm.com. Thanks so much, everyone, and have a great day.